The rusted lock gave way under the force of Thomas Tucker's boot heel, and the woman huddled in the corner of the cellar flinched at the sound, her chains rattling against the dirt floor as she pressed herself against the damp stone wall. Thomas had been tracking the Dawson gang for 3 weeks across the Arizona territory, following them from their last bank robbery in Prescott all the way to this abandoned ranch house just outside Flagstaff. He expected to find stolen gold or weapons stashed in the cellar. He never expected to find her. "Easy now," Thomas said, holding up both hands as he descended the rickety wooden stairs. The September heat of 1878 did not reach down here, and the air smelled of earth and fear. "I am not going to hurt you. My name is Thomas Tucker. I am a bounty hunter, and those men who kept you here are dead." The woman's dark eyes were wide in her gaunt face, tangled black hair falling past her shoulders. Her dress, once probably a modest calico print, hung in tatters. The chain around her ankle was bolted to the stone foundation, long enough for her to move around the small space but nothing more. "Are you real?" Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Or am I dreaming again?" "I am real as the day is long." Thomas approached slowly, the way he might approach a wounded animal. In the dim light filtering through the cellar door above, he could see she was young, maybe 20 or 21, with delicate features beneath the dirt and exhaustion. "How long have you been down here?" "I do not know." "Weeks." "Months maybe. They took my watch." Her fingers trembled as she touched her throat. "They took everything." Thomas knelt beside her, examining the iron cuff around her ankle. It was crude but effective, the kind of restraint used on prisoners being transported. "What is your name?" She hesitated as if she had forgotten. Zelda Edwards." "Well, Miss Edwards, let us get you out of these chains." Thomas pulled his lockpick set from his vest pocket. His fingers were calloused from years of hard riding and harder living, but they worked with surprising delicacy on the lock mechanism. "Can you tell me who took you?" "The Dawson brothers, Jake and Silas. They raided our wagon train 6 months back." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, anger replacing fear. "They killed my father, shot him right in front of me when he tried to fight them off. My mother died of fever 2 years before that, so there was no one else. They took me and 3 other women. I do not know what happened to the others. They separated us." The lock clicked open and the heavy iron cuff fell away from her ankle. The skin beneath was raw and scarred, and Thomas felt his jaw tighten with anger at the sight. "Can you walk?" Zelda tried to stand, but her legs buckled immediately. Thomas caught her before she hit the ground, and she was light as a bird in his arms, all sharp angles and fragile bones. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday." "Maybe. They threw down some bread and water. Sometimes they forgot for days." She was shaking now, and Thomas was not sure if it was from weakness or the shock of sudden freedom. He carried her up the stairs and out into the blazing Arizona sun. His horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, waited where he had left him tied to the fence post. The bodies of Jake and Silas Dawson lay where they had fallen in the shootout an hour earlier, flies already gathering in the heat. Zelda turned her face away from the corpses. "I prayed someone would come. Every day I prayed. I started to think God had forgotten about me." "God might forget, but the law does not." Thomas set her down gently in the shade of the house's overhang. "Wait here. I have supplies in my saddlebag." He returned with his canteen and a bundle of dried beef and hardtack. Zelda drank the water greedily, and Thomas had to slow her down before she made herself sick. "Easy. Small sips. Your stomach needs time to adjust." She nodded, water dripping down her chin, and Thomas looked away to give her some dignity. He scanned the horizon, looking for any sign of other riders. The Dawson gang had been 5 men strong when they hit that bank in Prescott, but he had only found 2 here. The others were either scattered or lying dead somewhere between here and there. What happens to me now? Zelda asked, her voice small. Thomas turned back to face her. In the harsh sunlight, he could see she was actually quite beautiful beneath the layers of grime and suffering. Her dark eyes held an intelligence that captivity had not dimmed, and there was a strength in her that he recognized, the kind of strength that came from surviving things that should have broken you. I take you into Flagstaff. Get you cleaned up, fed properly, find you somewhere safe to stay while we figure out your situation. My situation. Zelda laughed, but there was no humor in it. I have no money, no family, no prospects. My father was a teacher, and he taught me to read and write and do sums. But what good is that? No one wants to hire a woman who has been held captive by outlaws. They will all assume the worst, and maybe they would be right to assume it. Thomas felt something twist in his chest at the resignation in her voice. He had seen too much of the world's cruelty, tracked too many evil men, but there was something about Zelda Edwards that made him want to promise her things would be different. The worst would be letting those men win by treating you like damaged goods, he said firmly. You survived. That takes more courage than most people will ever know. Zelda met his eyes, searching for something, and Thomas held her gaze steady. She needed to know he meant every word. You do not know me, she finally said. No, but I know men like the Dawsons, and I know what it takes to stand up to them. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. They rode into Flagstaff 3 hours later, Zelda seated in front of Thomas on Copper's back, wrapped in his spare shirt and a blanket. She had fallen asleep against his chest within the first mile, exhausted beyond endurance, and Thomas kept one arm around her waist to keep her steady. The town was bustling with the usual late afternoon activity. Wagons rolled down the main street, kicking up dust. Women in proper dresses carried parasols against the sun. Men gathered outside the saloon, their voices carrying on the dry air. Thomas guided Copper to the doctor's office, a small building marked by a weathered sign reading Dr. Samuel Patterson, physician. The doctor was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and gentle hands. He took one look at Zelda and ushered them inside, clearing his examination table with efficient movements. Found her chained in a cellar outside of town, Thomas explained. She has been held captive for months, malnourished, dehydrated, and that ankle needs attention. Doctor. Patterson nodded grimly. I will take care of her. There is a boarding house 2 doors down Mrs. Chen's place. She is a good woman, discreet. The young lady will need somewhere to recover. I will arrange it. Thomas started to leave, but Zelda's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Do not leave me. Her eyes were wide with panic. Please, I do not know anyone here. I do not know what to do. Thomas covered her hand with his. I am just going to get you a room and some proper clothes. The doctor needs to examine you, and I should not be here for that. I will be right outside that door, and I will not leave town without telling you. I give you my word. Zelda held on for another moment, then slowly released him. Thomas could feel the imprint of her fingers on his skin as he stepped outside into the fading sunlight. Mrs. Chen was indeed a good woman. A Chinese immigrant who had come west with her husband to work on the railroads before his death, 10 years prior. She asked no questions when Thomas explained that he needed a room for a young woman who had been through hardship, just nodded and led him upstairs to a clean, simply furnished room with lace curtains on the window. She can stay as long as she needs, Mrs. Chen said in her accented English. I will bring up hot water for a bath and some clothes. I have things that might fit her. Thomas paid her for 2 weeks in advance, then went to the general store and bought soap, a brush, undergarments, stockings, and a ready-made dress in dark blue cotton. He had to guess at Zelda's size, picturing her thin frame in his mind, hoping he got it close to right. By the time he returned to the doctor's office, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Dr. Patterson met him at the door. "She is severely malnourished and has some infected sores on her ankle and wrists, but nothing that will not heal with proper care and food. I cleaned and bandaged her wounds and gave her a mild sedative. She was quite agitated, kept asking for you. Can she travel to the boarding house? If you carry her, she should not walk on that ankle for a few days." Dr. Patterson paused, studying Thomas with shrewd eyes. "She told me what happened to her, or some of it. She also told me how you found her. You did a good thing today, Mr. Tucker." Thomas shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Just doing my job. Your job was capturing the Dawsons. Saving that girl was something else entirely." Thomas found Zelda sitting on the examination table, swimming in one of the doctor's clean shirts. Her face had been washed, revealing high cheekbones and a straight nose. Her hair was still matted, but clean, pulled back with a strip of bandage cloth. "Ready to get you settled in a proper bed," Thomas said. Zelda nodded, and once again Thomas lifted her into his arms. She weighed next to nothing, and he made a mental note to ensure Mrs. Chen fed her well. The boarding house was warm and smelled of cooking food. Mrs. Chen had indeed drawn a hot bath, steam rising from the copper tub in Zelda's room. She had also left out a plate of rice and vegetables, simple but nourishing food. Thomas set Zelda down on the bed, then turned to leave, but again her hand caught his. "Stay, just until I fall asleep. I know it is not proper, but I cannot bear to be alone yet." Thomas hesitated, then pulled the room's single chair to the bedside and sat down. "I will stay." Zelda lay back against the pillows, her eyes already drooping from the sedative. "Why did you help me? Most men would have just claimed the bounty on the Dawsons and left." "Because it was the right thing to do." "The world does not run on right things, Mr. Tucker. It runs on money and power and men taking what they want. Maybe, but that does not mean we should not try to be better." Zelda smiled faintly. "You are an idealist." "I did not think bounty hunters were allowed to be idealists. I am full of surprises." She was quiet for a moment, her breathing evening out. Thomas thought she had fallen asleep when she spoke again, her voice drowsy. "My father used to say that a person's character is revealed not by what they do when others are watching, but by what they do when no one would ever know. You could have left me in that cellar. Probably should have, from a practical standpoint, but you did not. That says something about who you are. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was. I miss him every day." A tear slid down her cheek. "I wish he could have met you." Thomas felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest, something warm and protective and entirely inappropriate given that he had known this woman for less than a day. He told himself it was just compassion, natural sympathy for someone who had suffered. But as he watched her fall asleep, her face finally peaceful, he knew it was more than that. He sat with her until the moon rose, then quietly let himself out and walked to the saloon. He needed a drink and information. The bartender was a talkative fellow named Marcus who knew everyone's business. Over a whiskey, Thomas learned that there had indeed been a wagon train attacked 6 months ago, and that several women had been taken. The territorial marshal had organized search parties, but they found nothing. Eventually, people assumed the women were dead. "You are saying one of them is alive?" Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Which one?" "Zelda Edwards, daughter of a schoolteacher named Jonathan Edwards." Marcus's eyes widened. "I knew Edwards. Good man, educated, had a daughter smart as a whip. Folks said it was a shame about what happened." "Marshal Harding will want to know about this." "Where can I find the marshal?" His office is next to the jail, but this time of night he will be at home. Big house on Elm Street, white fence. Cannot miss it. Thomas found Marshall Harding exactly where Marcus said he would be, sitting on his front porch with his wife, enjoying the cooler evening air. The marshal was a solid man in his 50s with iron gray hair and a no-nonsense manner. Thomas explained the situation, and Harding listened with growing intensity. "The Edwards girl alive. I will be damned. We searched for weeks, found 2 of the other women dead, killed by the outlaws when they were done with them. The third one, Sarah Mitchell, she showed up in Prescott last month. Made it there on her own somehow, nearly dead from exposure. She could not tell us much, just that they had been separated. Poor thing lost her mind from it all. Her brother took her back east to live with family. Zelda is at Mrs. Chen's boarding house. She is in rough shape, but the doctor says she will recover physically. The rest might take longer." Harding nodded gravely. "I will need to get her statement, but it can wait a day or 2. Let her get her strength back. You got the Dawsons, both dead. Jake went for his gun when I identified myself. Silas tried to run. There was no choice. No loss there. Those 2 had a price on their heads in 3 territories. You will get your bounty. Come by my office tomorrow and we will do the paperwork." Harding paused. "What are your plans now?" Moving on to the next job. Thomas had been asking himself the same question since he rode into town. Normally, he would collect his bounty and ride out within a day or 2, following the trail of the next wanted man. But the thought of leaving Zelda alone in Flagstaff, vulnerable and without protection, sat wrong with him. "I am thinking I might stay in town for a bit, make sure Miss Edwards gets settled properly." Harding's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "That is decent of you. Girl like that will need someone looking out for her, at least until she gets her bearings back. This town is better than most, but there is still talk. People will wonder about what happened to her while she was held captive. It is not fair, but it is the truth. Then people are fools." "Never said they were not, just telling you how it is." Harding stood and extended his hand. "You are a good man, Tucker. Not many would have done what you did today." Thomas shook his hand and left, walking back through the quiet streets to the small hotel where he usually stayed when passing through Flagstaff. But sleep did not come easily. He kept seeing Zelda's face in his mind, the way she had looked at him with those dark eyes full of fear and hope and desperate trust. He had been alone for most of his 32 years. His father had died when he was 12, thrown from a horse. His mother had remarried quickly to a man who did not want a stepson. And Thomas had left home at 14, lying about his age to get work on a cattle drive. He had been drifting ever since, taking odd jobs, learning to track and shoot, eventually falling into bounty hunting because it paid well and he was good at it. He had never let himself get attached to anything or anyone. Attachments meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. It was easier to keep moving, to never stay anywhere long enough to put down roots. But something about Zelda Edwards made him want to stop running. The next morning, Thomas was at Mrs. Chen's boarding house early, carrying a tray of breakfast from the restaurant down the street. Mrs. Chen let him in with a conspiratorial smile. "She is awake. She asked about you first thing." Thomas climbed the stairs to Zelda's room and knocked softly. Her voice, stronger than yesterday, called for him to enter. She was sitting up in bed, wearing one of the nightgowns Mrs. Chen had provided. Her hair had been properly washed and brushed, falling in dark waves around her shoulders. The haunted look was still in her eyes, but there was color in her cheeks, and she managed a smile when she saw him. "Mr. Tucker, I was hoping you would come. I brought breakfast. Figured you could use a proper meal." He set the tray on the bedside table. Eggs, bacon, biscuits with gravy and fresh coffee. And please call me Thomas. I think we are past formalities. Then you should call me Zelda." She reached for the coffee first, wrapping both hands around the cup and inhaling the steam. "I have not had real coffee in so long. They only gave me water, and sometimes it was not even clean water." Thomas sat in the chair while she ate, noting with satisfaction that her appetite was healthy. She did not eat like a lady, taking delicate bites, but like someone who had known real hunger and was not about to waste a crumb. "I spoke with Marshall Harding last night," Thomas said. "He will need your statement eventually, but there is no rush. He said to tell you to take your time recovering." Zelda nodded, washing down a bite of biscuit with coffee. "What will happen to me, Thomas? I know you arranged this room, and I am grateful beyond words, but I cannot stay here forever. I need to figure out what to do with my life." It was the question Thomas had been wrestling with all night. He took a breath, knowing what he was about to say would change everything. "I have a proposal. It might sound crazy, and you can say no without any hard feelings, but hear me out." Zelda set down her fork, giving him her full attention. "The truth is, a woman alone in your situation is going to face difficulties. People talk, they judge, and they make assumptions. It is not right, but it is reality. Even if you find work, which will not be easy, you will always be looked at sideways. You will always be that girl who was taken by outlaws." "I know," Zelda said quietly. "I have been thinking about it all morning. I thought maybe I could go east to a city where no one knows me, start fresh somehow. You could. Or you could marry me." The words hung in the air between them. Zelda stared at him, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. "You are proposing marriage to me, a woman you met yesterday. I am offering you my name and my protection. I have some money saved up, enough to buy a piece of land and build a house. I have been thinking about settling down, finding a place to stop running. We could do that together. You would have respectability, security, a chance to start over without the weight of the past following you. But you do not love me. You do not even know me." Thomas met her eyes steadily. "No, I do not. Not yet. But I respect you and I admire your strength. I think we could build something good together given time. It would be a marriage of convenience at first, but it would give you safety and a future. That is more than you have right now." Zelda set down her cup with a trembling hand. "And what would you get out of it? A home, a partner, a reason to stop drifting?" Thomas leaned forward. "I am not asking you to fall into my bed, Zelda. I am offering you a partnership. We can take things slow, let feelings develop naturally if they are going to, or not. Either way, you would have my name and my protection. No one would dare disrespect you or assume the worst about you. You would be Mrs. Thomas Tucker, and that means something. You would do that for me." "A stranger? You are not a stranger anymore. And yes, I would do that for you, because it is the right thing to do and because I think maybe we could be good for each other." Zelda stood up from the bed, testing her injured ankle. She walked slowly to the window and looked out at the street below, where life was going on as normal for everyone else. Thomas gave her time to think, his heart beating harder than it should for a proposal that was supposed to be practical. "My father used to tell me about the ancient philosophers," Zelda said, her back still to him. "They had this idea that love was not just passion and feeling but choice. That real love was built through shared experiences and mutual respect, through choosing every day to honor your commitment to another person. He said the romantic love at first sight that poets write about is just infatuation, and real love takes time." She turned to face him, and Thomas saw tears on her cheeks. "I think my father would have liked you, Thomas Tucker, and I think he would tell me that a good man offering his hand is not something to refuse out of pride or fear." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "So yes, I will marry you. I will be your wife, and we will build something together. But I need you to promise me something, anything. Promise me that you will never feel obligated to stay with me if you meet someone else, someone you really love. Promise me that you will always be honest with me, even if the truth is hard. Thomas crossed the room and took her hands in his. They were small and delicate, but he could feel the calluses forming from the chains she had worn. I promise I will always be honest with you. But I am not going to meet someone else, Zelda. When I make a commitment, I keep it. If we do this, we do it all the way. I am not looking for an escape route. Zelda searched his face, then nodded. All right then. Let us do this crazy thing. They were married 3 days later in a small ceremony at the church, with Marshall Harding and his wife as witnesses. Zelda wore the new dress Thomas had bought her, and Mrs. Chen had done her hair up in an elegant style. She looked beautiful and terrified, and Thomas felt his throat tighten when she said her vows. The preacher was a kind man who did not ask questions about their short courtship. Times were hard in the Arizona territory, and quick marriages were common. He blessed their union and pronounced them husband and wife. Thomas kissed Zelda chastely on the cheek, and they signed the marriage certificate with slightly shaking hands. That night, they returned to the boarding house, where Mrs. Chen had prepared a special dinner for them. Thomas had insisted they stay there until Zelda was fully recovered, and he had found suitable land to buy. There was no awkward wedding night because Thomas had been clear about his intentions. He slept on the floor with his bedroll while Zelda took the bed, and if she was relieved or disappointed, she did not say. Over the following weeks, they settled into an unexpected rhythm. Thomas would go out during the day, looking at available property and meeting with land agents. Zelda would rest and recover, her strength returning slowly but surely. In the evenings, they would sit together in her room or on Mrs. Chen's porch, and they would talk. Thomas learned that Zelda had been educated far beyond what was normal for women of that era. Her father had believed strongly that girls should be as educated as boys, and he had taught her mathematics, literature, history, and even some Latin. She could discuss philosophy and politics with an intelligence that surprised and delighted Thomas. Zelda learned that Thomas was more than just a hard bounty hunter. He had taught himself to read during long nights on cattle drives, working through newspapers and dime novels by firelight. He had a sharp mind for strategy and a surprisingly gentle soul beneath his tough exterior. He told her stories about the places he had been, the people he had tracked, and the life he wanted to build now that he was ready to settle down. They were building a friendship, and with it came the first stirrings of something deeper. One evening, nearly a month after their marriage, they were sitting on Mrs. Chen's porch watching the sunset when Zelda reached over and took Thomas's hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact beyond what was necessary. "I found something today," she said. "There is a piece of land for sale about 10 miles north of town. The owner died and his son wants to sell. It has a creek running through it, good grazing land, and a small cabin already built. It is not much, but it could be a start." Thomas squeezed her hand. "Let us go look at it tomorrow." The land was everything Zelda had described and more. The cabin was rough but solid, built from local timber with a stone fireplace and 2 rooms. The property had 100 acres of grassland and forest, with the creek providing fresh water year-round. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the blue sky. "What do you think?" Thomas asked, watching Zelda explore the cabin. She ran her hand along the rough wooden walls, peering into the empty rooms, then stepped back outside and looked at the view. "I think it is perfect. I think it could be home." Thomas bought the property that week, using the money from the Dawson bounty and his savings from years of work. They moved in with very little, just the clothes they wore and supplies from the general store, but it was theirs, The first weeks were hard work. Thomas repaired the cabin's roof and chinked gaps in the walls. Zelda, her health fully restored now, planted a garden and sewed curtains for the windows. They bought chickens and 2 milk cows. Thomas built a proper barn and corral. Slowly, the empty property became a working homestead. They fell into a domestic routine. Thomas would work the land during the day while Zelda managed the house. They cooked meals together in the evenings, and Thomas found himself looking forward to that time more than anything else. There was something deeply satisfying about coming home to find Zelda waiting for him, about sharing stories about their day over simple food at their own table. One night, about 3 months into their marriage, they were sitting by the fireplace after dinner. Winter was coming to the Arizona high country, and the nights were getting cold. Zelda was mending one of Thomas's shirts while he oiled his saddle, and the quiet domesticity of it all made his chest ache with something he was not ready to name. "Thomas," Zelda said suddenly, setting down her mending, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "You regret this, marrying me, I mean, giving up your freedom to take care of someone you barely knew?" Thomas looked up from the saddle, surprised by the question. "No, not for a single moment." "Why would you ask that?" "Because sometimes I catch you looking at me with this expression, and I cannot figure out what it means, like you are trying to solve a puzzle." Thomas set aside the saddle and moved to sit beside her on the small sofa they had bought in town. "I am not going to lie to you, Zelda. Sometimes I do not understand what I am feeling. I have spent most of my life alone, keeping people at arm's length. It made things simpler. But you, being here with you, building this life together, it is different. It is good, but it scares me a little because I am not used to caring about someone else." Zelda turned to face him, her dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "It scares me too. After what happened with the Dawsons, I did not think I would ever trust a man again, but I trust you, Thomas. You have been nothing but kind and respectful and patient. You gave me time to heal, time to find myself again. That is a gift I can never repay. You do not need to repay it. That is what marriage is supposed to be. Is it, though? Most marriages I have seen are about obligation and duty and making do. This feels different. It feels like we are choosing each other every day." Thomas reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, letting his hand linger on her cheek. "We are choosing each other. And every day I make that choice, I am more sure it was the right one." Zelda leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly. When she opened them again, there was something new in her expression, something that made Thomas's breath catch. "Can I tell you something I have been afraid to say?" "Always. I think I am falling in love with you. Real love, not just gratitude or friendship. When you come home at the end of the day, my heart lifts. When you smile at me over breakfast, I want that moment to last forever. When I lie in bed at night, I wish you were there beside me instead of on the floor. I know we said we would take things slow, but I cannot help how I feel." Thomas felt something break open inside his chest, something he had been holding locked away for so long he had forgotten it was there. "Zelda, I am already in love with you. I think I have been for a while now. I was just too stubborn or scared to admit it. You are brave and beautiful and smart as hell, and coming home to you is the best part of my day. Building this life with you makes me happier than I have ever been. So if you are ready, if you really want this, then I am asking you again. Will you be my wife, truly my wife in every sense of the word?" In answer, Zelda leaned forward and kissed him. It was tentative at first, both of them learning the shape of each other, but then it deepened into something real and passionate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Zelda Tucker." "I love you too, Thomas." That night, they shared a bed for the first time, and Thomas was gentle and patient, letting Zelda set the pace. She had been through trauma, and he was determined that their intimacy would be about healing and connection, not obligation. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the quilts, listening to the wind howl outside and feeling grateful for the warmth they had built together. "Thank you," Zelda whispered in the darkness. "For what? For saving me. For giving me your name. For making me feel safe enough to love again." Thomas kissed her forehead. "You saved yourself, Zelda. You survived when most people would have given up. I just gave you the tools to rebuild. The strength was always yours." The months that followed were the happiest of Thomas's life. Winter came with snow that blanketed their little homestead in white. They spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading and simply enjoying each other's presence. Thomas taught Zelda to shoot, and she proved to be a natural marksman. Zelda taught Thomas to appreciate poetry and literature, reading aloud to him from books they ordered from catalogs. When spring arrived, their garden flourished and Thomas bought a small herd of cattle. The homestead was becoming profitable, and they talked about the future with real excitement. One morning in late May, Zelda woke up feeling queasy. By the end of the week, Dr. Patterson had confirmed what she suspected. She was pregnant. Thomas's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully, worried he had been too rough. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" Zelda asked, though she could see the answer on his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it. I never thought I would have this. A home, a wife I love, and now a child. A year ago I was just drifting, and now I have everything." The pregnancy was not easy. Zelda suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Thomas fretted over her constantly. He hired a woman from town, a widow named Mrs. Patterson, who was the doctor's sister, to come help with the heavier housework. He would not let Zelda lift anything heavy or tire herself out. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Zelda protested one day when Thomas insisted she sit down while he hauled water from the creek. "I know, but humor me. I have never done this before, and I am terrified of something going wrong." Zelda softened at that. She knew Thomas carried guilt about the violence he had dealt with in his bounty hunting days, and he was determined that their child would grow up in peace and safety. "Nothing is going to go wrong. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Yes, but this is our baby. That makes it different." Their son was born in January of 1879, during a snowstorm that trapped Dr. Patterson at their homestead for 3 days. The labor was long and difficult, and Thomas paced the cabin like a caged animal until he finally heard his child's first cry, "Doctor." Patterson emerged from the bedroom with a tired smile. "You have a healthy son, and your wife is doing well. She is asking for you." Thomas found Zelda propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Come meet your son." Thomas approached carefully, as if the baby might break, and looked down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blankets. He had dark hair like his mother and his father's strong features. He was the most beautiful thing Thomas had ever seen. "What should we name him?" Zelda asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Thomas knew exactly what felt right. "Jonathan, after your father, so that part of him lives on." Zelda's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Jonathan Tucker, I love it." "Papa would have loved it too." Thomas carefully took his son in his arms, marveling at how small and perfect he was. "Hello, Jonathan. I am your father, and I promise I am going to do everything in my power to give you a good life. You are going to grow up knowing you are loved and wanted and safe." "That is my promise to you." Little Jonathan yawned and made a tiny sound that might have been agreement, and both his parents laughed through their tears. The The years that followed were full of joy and hard work. Jonathan grew into a bright, curious boy with his mother's intelligence and his father's steady nature. The homestead prospered, and Thomas built additions onto the cabin to accommodate their growing family. When Jonathan was 3, Zelda gave birth to a daughter they named Rose. 2 years after that came another son, James. Their cabin rang with the sounds of children playing, and Thomas often found himself pausing in his work just to listen and feel grateful. Zelda thrived as a mother and wife. The shadows from her captivity never fully disappeared, but they faded to manageable ghosts. She found purpose in teaching their children, passing on the education her father had given her. She also started teaching other children in the area, and their cabin became an informal schoolhouse 2 days a week. Thomas gave up bounty hunting completely and focused on the ranch. He raised cattle and horses and developed a reputation for breeding good stock. Men would ride from hundreds of miles away to buy Tucker horses. Marshall Harding became a regular visitor and friend. He brought them news from town and beyond, and he never tired of telling people about how Thomas had saved Zelda and given her a new life. "Best thing you ever did," Harding said one evening over dinner. "Look at this place. Look at this family. You built something real, Tucker." "We built it," Thomas corrected, reaching for Zelda's hand across the table. "I just provided the opportunity. Zelda made it a home." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Thomas surprised Zelda with a trip to Flagstaff. Just the two of them. Mrs. Patterson watched the children, and they stayed at Mrs. Chen's boarding house, in the same room where Zelda had recovered all those years ago. Mrs. Chen was older now but still sharp, and she fussed over them like they were her own children. "I knew you two would make it," she said. "I could see it even then, the way you looked at each other, like you had found something rare and precious." That night, Thomas and Zelda walked through the quiet streets of Flagstaff, hand in hand. The town had grown in the past decade, but some things remained the same. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Zelda asked. "If you had not found me, or if you had just left me there, or if I had said no when you proposed. I try not to. It makes me too grateful for how things actually turned out and too angry thinking about what might have been. I think about it sometimes. Not in a bad way, but just to remind myself how lucky I am. I was chained in the dark, thinking I was going to die there, and now I have a husband I love more than anything, 3 beautiful children, and a home I am proud of. It feels like a miracle." Thomas stopped walking and turned to face her. The moonlight caught in her hair, and she was just as beautiful to him now as she had been that first day, maybe more so because now he knew every part of her, inside and out. "You are my miracle, Zelda. You took a man who was running from everything and gave him a reason to stop and build something real. Every good thing in my life comes from the moment I decided to break that lock and set you free. You set me free, and I chose to bind myself to you. Best decision I ever made." They kissed under the Arizona stars, 2 people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life in the light. Years continued to pass in the way they do when life is full and good. Their children grew tall and strong. Jonathan inherited his father's love of the land and his mother's sharp mind. He started taking over more of the ranch work as he grew into young manhood. Rose was spirited and independent, insisting on learning to rope and ride as well as any boy. James was quiet and thoughtful, always with his nose in a book. Thomas and Zelda grew older together, their love deepening with each passing season. They added more rooms to the cabin until it was more of a proper ranch house. They hosted barn dances and barbecues, and their home became a gathering place for the small community that had grown up around them. Sometimes, On quiet evenings when the children were occupied and the work was done, Thomas and Zelda would sit on their porch and watch the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and red. They would hold hands and not need to speak, comfortable in the silence that comes from truly knowing another person. But one evening, when Zelda was 40 years old and Thomas was 51, she broke that comfortable silence with a question. You ever miss it? The adventure, the freedom of riding wherever you wanted, not being tied down to land and family. Thomas considered the question seriously, as he always did when Zelda asked him something important. Honestly, not even a little bit. I thought I wanted freedom, but what I really wanted was purpose. I wanted to matter to someone, to build something that would last beyond my own life. I found that with you and the children. This ranch, this family, this is my legacy. It is worth more than all the freedom in the world. Zelda leaned her head on his shoulder. I feel the same way. Sometimes I remember that girl chained in the cellar and she feels like a different person. Like that was another life entirely. That girl was broken and scared and lost. The woman I am now is strong and loved and home. You gave me that. We gave it to each other. They sat in peaceful silence as night fell, the sounds of their children's laughter drifting from inside the house, the cattle lowing softly in the distance, the creek babbling its endless song. It was an ordinary moment, the kind that makes up most of a life, but it was also everything. When Jonathan turned 18, he announced his intention to marry Annie Sutherland, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. The wedding was held at the Tucker Ranch, with half the county in attendance. It was a joyous celebration, and Thomas found himself fighting tears as he watched his son take his vows. That is how it is supposed to be, Zelda whispered, standing beside him. Young love full of hope and possibility. Like ours was different. Better, I think, because we built it ourselves from nothing. We chose each other every single day, and that made it stronger. 2 years later, Rose shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to go east to attend a university. It was almost unheard of for a young woman from a ranch family, but Thomas and Zelda supported her fully. They used their savings to pay for her education, proud of her ambition and courage. James stayed close to home, eventually taking a position as a teacher at the school in Flagstaff. He married a sweet girl named Elizabeth, and they settled on a small piece of land Thomas gave them from the ranch property. As their children built their own lives, Thomas and Zelda found themselves alone together again, much as they had been in the early years of their marriage. But now they were older, marked by time and experience, their love tested and proven through years of partnership. One spring morning, 25 years after Thomas had found Zelda in that cellar, he woke to find her already up and dressed, standing by the bedroom window looking out at the ranch. Could not sleep, he asked, joining her at the window, just thinking. It is our anniversary next week, 25 years, a quarter century of marriage. Thomas put his arm around her waist and pulled her close. Best 25 years of my life. Mine too. Do you know what I realized this morning? I have now spent more of my life as your wife than I spent as anything else. More than being my father's daughter, more than being a captive, more than anything. Being your wife is the truest thing about me. Being your husband is the truest thing about me too. They decided to mark their anniversary with a family gathering. Jonathan and Annie came with their 2 young children. Rose traveled all the way from Philadelphia, full of stories about her studies and the city. James and Elizabeth arrived with their infant son. Marshall Harding, now retired, made the trip from town. The ranch house was full of noise and laughter and love. Thomas stood back and watched it all, Zelda beside him, and felt the weight of his gratitude almost bring him to his knees. Look at what we built, he said quietly. Look at all of this. I see it. Zelda smiled up at him. We took two broken people and made something whole and beautiful. We created a family, a legacy. Those grandchildren playing in the yard, they will tell their children about us someday. They will remember that their grandfather saved their grandmother, and that love can grow in the darkest places. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Thomas and Zelda walked down to the creek where they had spent so many evenings over the years. The water sparkled in the moonlight, and somewhere an owl hooted softly. "I want you to know something," Thomas said, taking both of Zelda's hands in his. "If I could go back and live my life again, I would not change a single thing. Every mistake, every hardship, every lonely night on the trail, it all led me to that ranch where I found you. It was all worth it to end up here with you. I would not change anything either, not even the captivity, as horrible as it was, because it brought me to you. My father used to say that sometimes God works in mysterious ways, and I think he was right. We were both lost, and somehow we found each other. Found each other and built a life worth living." They kissed under the stars, the same stars that had witnessed their courtship and marriage and all the years between. They were older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but the love between them burned just as bright as it had that first night when they admitted their feelings. The years continued their steady march. Thomas and Zelda grew into old age together, their hands finding each other automatically, their steps slowing but always in sync. They watched their grandchildren grow and welcomed great-grandchildren into the world. The ranch passed to Jonathan, who ran it with the same care and pride his father had. When Thomas was 68 years old, he had a heart attack while mending fence. Jonathan found him and got him back to the house, where Dr. Patterson's nephew, who had taken over the practice, did what he could. Thomas survived, but he was weakened, and they all knew his time was growing short. Zelda never left his side during his recovery. She sat beside his bed, holding his hand, reading to him, talking to him about their life together. Sometimes they would just sit in silence, communicating in the wordless language of people who had shared a lifetime. One afternoon, when Thomas was feeling strong enough to sit up, he called for Jonathan and made him promise to take care of his mother. "I know you will," Thomas said, his voice weaker than it used to be but still steady. "You are a good man, son, better than I was at your age. You take after your mother that way." "I take after both of you," Jonathan said, tears in his eyes. "You taught me everything I know about being a husband and father. The way you love Mama, that is what I try to do with Annie." After Jonathan left, Zelda sat beside Thomas and took his hand. "You are not allowed to leave me yet," she said firmly. "We still have more life to live together. I am not planning on going anywhere if I can help it. But Zelda, I need you to promise me something, anything. If I do go first, I do not want you to spend the rest of your life grieving. You have so much love to give, so much joy in you. Live your life fully. Remember me, but do not let missing me stop you from being happy." Zelda shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "There is no being happy without you. You are my whole heart, Thomas Tucker. And you are mine. But hearts can heal and life goes on. I want yours to go on in beauty and joy, not sadness. Promise me." "I promise I will try, but I make no promises about finding happiness without you. You set the standard too high." Thomas recovered slowly, but he was never quite the same. His strength did not fully return, and he had to leave more and more of the ranch work to Jonathan. But he was content, spending his days on the porch with Zelda, watching the land they had built together, surrounded by family. Zelda remained strong and healthy, caring for Thomas with the same devotion she had shown throughout their marriage. She would sit with him for hours, reminiscing about their years together, laughing about the early days when they were learning to be married, marveling at how their children and grandchildren had grown. On a clear autumn day, 5 years after his heart attack, Thomas woke feeling strangely peaceful. The air was crisp and clean, and the mountains stood sharp against the bright blue sky. He could hear Zelda in the kitchen, humming softly as she made breakfast. The sound made him smile. "Zelda," he called, and she appeared in the doorway immediately. "What do you need, love? Just you. Come sit with me." She settled beside him on the bed, and Thomas took her hand, studying the lines and spots that marked their shared years. "I love you," he said simply. "I have loved you since that first day when you were so brave and broken and beautiful. I will love you beyond my last breath and into whatever comes after. I love you too, always and forever." Thomas closed his eyes, a smile on his face, and quietly slipped away. His last breath was peaceful, his hand warm in Zelda's, his heart full of love. Zelda held him for a long time, tears streaming silently down her face. Then she kissed his forehead and whispered, "Until we meet again, my love. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me." The funeral was attended by everyone in the county. Thomas Tucker had been respected and loved, a man who kept his word and treated everyone fairly. Marshall Harding, now very old himself, gave a eulogy that spoke of Thomas's courage and kindness, but it was Zelda's words that brought tears to every eye. "Thomas Tucker found me in my darkest hour and offered me light," she said, standing strong beside his grave. "He gave me his name when I had nothing, and in doing so, gave me everything. He loved me when I thought I could never be loved again. He built a home with me, raised children with me, and showed me every single day what true partnership means. He was a good man, a faithful husband, a wonderful father and grandfather, and he was mine. I will carry him in my heart until the day we are reunited." Zelda lived another 8 years after Thomas's passing. She stayed in the ranch house, surrounded by family, telling stories about her and Thomas to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She taught the youngest ones to read, just as her father had taught her. She tended her garden and walked down to the creek on summer evenings, talking to Thomas as if he were still beside her. She never remarried or even considered it. She had made a promise to Thomas that she would live fully, and she kept that promise. She found joy in her family, in the land they had built together, in the memories they had created. But her heart belonged to Thomas and always would. When Zelda was 73 years old, she passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the bed she had shared with Thomas for so many years. Her children found her in the morning, a slight smile on her face, as if she had seen something wonderful in her last moments. They buried her beside Thomas, under the cottonwood tree they had planted together in their first year on the ranch. The stone read, "Zelda Tucker, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and friend. She chose love over fear." The family continued to prosper. Jonathan ran the ranch until his own children were old enough to take over. Rose became a respected educator, establishing schools throughout the West. James raised his family on his piece of the land, instilling in them the values his parents had taught him. Decades later, when the children were all gone and a new generation had taken over, people still told stories about Thomas Tucker, the bounty hunter who found a woman in chains and offered her his name. They told stories about Zelda Tucker, who survived the unthinkable and built a life of love and purpose. They spoke of a marriage that started as an act of kindness and grew into a great love story. And on clear autumn days, when the wind blew just right through the cottonwood trees, you could almost hear whispers of their love story carried on the breeze. The sound of a woman's laughter mixing with a man's deeper chuckle. The echo of promises made and kept. The ghost of a love so strong it transcended time and death. The ranch stood as a testament to what two people could build when they chose each other, when they worked together, when they loved without reservation. And in the end, that was the greatest legacy Thomas and Zelda Tucker left behind. Not just land or children or prosperity, but proof that love could grow in the darkest places, that kindness could change everything, and that choosing each other every single day was the greatest adventure of all. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived on parts of that original land, working the same creek water, looking at the same mountains, building their own lives on the foundation Thomas and Zelda had laid. And when they told their children bedtime stories, they always included the tale of the cowboy who broke the lock on a cellar door and found not just a woman, but his whole future. They told of the woman who took a chance on a stranger and discovered her home. They told of a love that started in darkness and grew into brilliant light, a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond, a love that built not just a ranch, but a legacy that would endure for generations. And in the telling and retelling of that story, Thomas and Zelda Tucker lived on, their love immortal, their courage remembered, their choice to build something beautiful together, inspiring everyone who heard it. They had taken broken pieces and made something whole. They had found each other when both were lost. They had chosen love, and that choice had made all the difference.